a podcast studio with a dedicated room, microphones, recording software, editing, and distribution to over 20 podcast platforms and additional video for Facebook, YouTube, and IGTV. For broadcast possibilities and to get your podcast started, contact us 879-4319. 879-4319. Be heard on Radio St. George, Radio Dixie, and a podcast studio. Just a few of the great things happening at Dixie State University.
Welcome to the podcast. We do recover with Jared Miller, your host.
And I'm Dr. Terry Sellers, your co-host.
This is a podcast about addiction, but more importantly, about recovery.
We want to talk about what successful recovery can look like.
Brought to you by Steps Recovery Center and the St. George Hilton Garden Inn.
What up, what up, what up? This is your host, Jared Miller. You're listening to episode 008 of We Do Recover. Today I'm joined by your co-host, Dr. Terry Sellers.
Whoa.
We got our producer, the man that makes this whole thing possible, Sean Denovan.
Babyface Sean.
Yeah. And we have the owner, your featured guest of Renaissance Ranch, Taz Decker. This podcast is recorded in sunny St. George, Utah. Episode 008 is brought to you by Steps Recovery Centers, where addiction ends and healing begins. Listen to me. If you or a loved one needs help, stop procrastinating. Give them a call. They can find treatment for you. 801-800-8142. Dr. Sellers, last week you said you had a golf game. How'd that golf game go?
Well, I had a lot of fun. I played with our featured guest, Taz Decker, who, I don't know if you've ever met Taz. We're going to introduce him today, but Taz is a big guy. He hits the ball a long, long, long ways, and it's hard to compete against somebody that hits it that far, but we held our own. I had a good time, played fairly well. The weather was actually pretty good for St. George last week. It was not nearly as hot last Friday as it was previous to that. So we had a fun time. It was really fun.
Listen, I can believe that he crushes the ball on the golf course because I play on his softball team. He asked me to play, me and my girlfriend Mandy, to play on his softball team. And literally every time he gets up to bat, everybody's like, okay, Taz, keep it in the park this time. Stop hitting it over the fence. We don't want an out. We want you to get on base, right? Because the dude just... He crushes it.
Well, he's a bigger man than a lot of people.
Let's bring him in. Let's get him in the mix.
Taz Decker.
That's flattering. I don't hit a lot of home runs. That's not true.
Lies.
But it feels good. People like to, give you compliments. And golf, it's not about how far you can hit it. It's about putting. And Terry had a pretty good day, and I actually owe him. Here's your 4 quarters.
What?
Did I owe you? So
I think I won $1.
Yeah, he did.
I think I kept score though, so it always helps to keep score because then you win every time.
There you go.
I paid up. I had to do I had to inventory some character defects after that round.
There you go.
I like it. Sean Denovan. Hey, so you mentioned last week that you shaved in your baby face. That's why Terry. What is you're back to like a scruff, man? What's going on?
Yeah, it's all gray scruff. Terry, what's that like to have gray hair all the time?
Talk to me about gray scruff.
You're used to being old.
Yes, I am very used to it.
What happens next?
Well, not then your gray stuff starts to fall out. That's the problem. You not only have gray stuff, but then you don't even have gray stuff. So,
well, I started on my chin, and then it worked my way up its cheeks. Now I'm finding it other places on the head. Well, actually, all over. I'm sad now.
Let's be careful where you're going with that.
They say gray shows wisdom.
Like in my ears.
So.
Oh, man.
That's horrible.
Listen,
hey, you asked, man.
When you
want me to be a part of it, I'll contribute. This is how it works.
When you got to start plucking ear hairs, you've made it to old.
Gray hair is distinguished. Ear hair is not.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Good point.
That's a good point. Well, hey, what are we doing today? We got Taz Decker, who is our featured guest, and we're going to do things a little bit differently this week than we have in the past. Just kind of changing it up, trying to see a format that we love, and, this is a grand experiment, and we're having a lot of fun with it, and I hope the audience, those of you who are listening, enjoy this as well. But in the past, what we've always done is we have had, in the first segment, we started with what life is like for our guest right now, and then we go back in the second segment and talk about how they got to where they are now, like their journey of how they got into recovery. And I think we did that format to highlight right up front kind of the great things that are going on. And I like that format. Some other people had some critiques about that and kind of wanted to see us change that up. And we're going to try a different format today and see how this goes. So today what we're going to start with is your story, like how you, maybe a little bit about how you got started using drugs and what that was like, and then take us up to, and we can just start, well, first of all, before I do that, I have to do this part. I just want to know right now, not all the great things you're doing, but just tell me a little bit about Taz right now. Like what do you do for a living? Who are you? Tell me a little bit about your family, that stuff. And we'll get back to that, I promise. But I just want a quick 2-minute of, tell me Taz Decker. Did I call you Taz Murray at one point? I have a good friend named Taz Murray, and if I accidentally call you that, then I'm sorry, but Taz Decker.
Future forgiveness.
Yeah. He's also a football player for BYU, but.
So my name is Taz Decker. I grew up here from St. George.
Okay.
And I've been married 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Through the grace.
Yeah, for sure.
Of our good Lord and miracles and a lot of forgiveness. A lot of work. We have 3 daughters, 14, 12, and 7.
You want to give him a shout out?
Jovi is 7. She's amazing. She's just one of a kind. She's full of energy and she challenges you, and she's beautiful and smart, and Presley is our enthusiast. She's enthusiastic. She's my little buddy. She goes on motorcycle rides with me. She likes to go fishing. She likes to, do those things and outdoors, and always up for an adventure. And you're gonna get the response of, hey Presley, how was volleyball last night? He's like, oh, it's the best thing ever, right? And that's a daily thing. That's a daily response for her. So, and then our oldest is Leah. She's steady rudder, man. She's an old soul, and just a really good kid, straight A's, and is playing volleyball. She's a freshman at Dixie High School.
Sweet.
So,
you're a blessed dude, buddy.
So Renaissance, without a doubt. And when I can stay in gratitude, I have awareness of that those blessings and what they are. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Because there's a lot of them, and so we moved back down here. I'll get more into that in 2014 to open Renaissance Recovery Outpatient Treatment Center. So a little bit about me.
Awesome, thank you. Now let's go back. Let's figure out how you got here. So take it from. Maybe just a brief early stuff, what was going on in your life growing up, that sort of stuff, and then start moving into how you got started using drugs or alcohol.
Yeah. I had a great childhood growing up. It was fun. I loved it. Growing up here in St. George was amazing. And, we explored southern Utah. We played a lot of sports. My dad got us involved in a lot of sports. And he coached a lot of my teams, which was great. We had a good time. A lot of memories were created, and a lot of time was spent recreating and sporting. And so,
do you have all good memories of that? The reason I ask you, let me tell you why I ask you that. So my dad coached me growing up too. Like almost everything I ever did, my dad was my coach, and there were times I resented that because my dad expected more out of me than he did sometimes out of the other kids on the team, which I think pushed me to be a better player, but I resented that sometimes. Did you ever feel that?
Well, sure, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, your parents going to push you a little bit further, right?
Right.
And you're going to naturally push back, especially when you got ego.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey,
you've
hit one of my problems.
You don't like to be told what to do, and so he's going to try to get the most out of you, and you could potentially resent someone for that, but at the end of the day, It's like, a good sponsor does the same thing, but you love that person because they did that for you. But
Yeah.
it wasn't always, because sports are intense.
No question.
It's emotional,
No
right?
question.
It's competitive,
Yep.
right? You're trying to win, as much as you try to say it's about playing the game, you're trying to win.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody, you're having a lot more fun when you're winning, definitely. So, grew up playing sports, very involved.
At
great
that
father
age,
figure.
it was about. But now you get into sober softball, and we'll
right.
talk about a recovery strong team. But for the first 3 years, we just played. We had kids. We lost most of our games, and just had a good time.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
So what else
It
did
can
life
turn
look like?
can turn into that. So, vivid memory when I look back, when I was in 7th grade, I didn't have I didn't have any trauma, right, per se, right? But there's a lot of different kinds, right? So
Yeah.
I didn't have a good reason. Let's say that I didn't, looking back, but I did feel in 7th grade. I remember I had a friend, and we were in band together, and we talked about suicide.
Heavy topic.
Yeah. And we joked around. It was a joke. We were joking, and we would say we're suicide brothers. And if we're going to go out, let's go out together. And, at the time I didn't think anything of it.
Right.
My awareness was so low that I didn't even, but now looking back, like, okay, there was something was there. I didn't feel really comfortable in my skin. There's something going on. And I think more evidence of that is later that year, 12 years old, I had my first drink.
Ooh.
And
How did that happen?
so,
How does a 12-year-old drink?
well,
I know the answer is there's a ton of answers to that, and I don't mean to sound so crazy that a 12-year-old would have a drink, but just tell me how you got exposed
Orally.
to. Well, okay, thank you. That was a great answer. That was the best answer I've ever heard. But
I love that Terry Sellers is here today.
totally my answer too.
Exactly. I had some friends that their dad, he drank, and he built homes, and he'd buy a cube or a case the beginning of each day, and at the end of the day, if he had a few left over, we could take some, one or two, without him knowing, right? It just depended. So we built up. There's 3 of us. We built up a stockpile. It was totally premeditated.
All right,
Couple knuckleheads.
Right? And it was on a school night.
but it sort of makes sense now.
Yeah.
To me.
Right. So it was on a school night. Walked home, no consequence. No one found out. Woke up, wasn't sick. Went to school.
You remember feeling anything from it?
I remember, sitting laying in my bed, and it just felt like it was spinning.
Okay.
And then
Was that spinning feeling good or bad?
it was good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Right.
extremely warm and
Yeah.
fuzzy. And
Okay, good.
wrapped in.
Right.
One of the best nights of sleep I'd had.
Okay.
Ever.
Awesome.
The midbrain had released dopamine, right, Dr. Sellers?
That's what had happened. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
I woke up and I said, I'm going to do that. Yeah, I'm going to do that again.
Exactly. Okay.
So, and that kind of played a big role into a lot of my experience from there on out, because I got away with a lot, right? I hid a lot. I concealed a lot, and my identity was lost somewhere in all of that. And so, high school was amazing. So I had a great time in high school. I partied in high school. By the time I was done with high school, I tried almost everything. But I had a success, what I consider, right, and I'm going into my blind spots of what I didn't see, because athletically I'd been successful,
Yeah.
and I had been taught to put a lot of stock in that, and if that's good, everything else might be good. So I earned a scholarship to play football at the University of Utah.
So it's safe to say that your successes were big enough that they masked some of the pain or the trauma or the underlying issues that you had that led you to start to drink at 12, right?
So yeah, the external, what people see, right?
Yes.
The external unmanageability
Thank you. Yeah.
was not there for me. I couldn't see it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there really wasn't. I got really lucky and never got in trouble and on paper. And my bottom was emotional, spiritual, my relationships, all of that. And I did, lost a lot. It's funny I say it. I don't lose a lot, just myself.
Well said.
Not much.
But that's obviously that's
Right.
quite a bit. So
let's get back to, so you got a scholarship. Did you have other offers?
yes,
So you chose the U out of the other offers.
yes.
Is there any other choice?
well,
it's the University of Utah, baby.
Listen, don't distract from what we're trying to do here. Who do the Utes play this week again? Shoot, they don't play anybody.
I grew up a BYU fan.
Really?
I would have gone there
Okay.
if they would have recruited me.
Okay,
But the Mighty Cougars were not interested
too-
in Taz Decker.
they were too cool. Yeah, sorry about that. I wish you'd.
Or vice versa. or
vice versa. I'll give you that.
It wasn't my path. Either way, it wasn't my path.
Listen, let's be honest. In the last 20 years, if you want to go to school at a football school, you go to Utah, not to BYU. But we're still fighting. Okay, so you get a scholarship. You head up to the U.
Yes, I go on a mission first.
Okay, where'd you go on a mission?
Yeah.
Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Oh,
Way
interesting.
cool.
Yeah,
Nice and dusty.
Tulsa. Yeah, and then Arkansas and
Little Broken Arrow, Oklahoma.
yeah. And had a great experience.
Okay.
Still have friends today. Without breaking any anonymity, a companion of mine just called me and just got into treatment this week.
Oh, good.
That's amazing.
And reached out, and someone that I've been in contact with over the years, and just knew that eventually this day would happen, and it happened this week, and it was one of my companions, and we ended up going through the similar struggles, and anyway, so
So
Real cool.
good. Listen, I think that point needs to be reiterated. This doesn't happen to kids that grow up underprivileged and who didn't have anything to eat growing up. This happens to everybody, and it happens to people that come home from missions, and it happens to, this disease doesn't wow, I can't come up with a word.
discriminate.
Thank
There
you.
you go.
Holy mackerel, what happened to my brain?
Yeah.
This disease does not discriminate with how you grew up or who you are, what color you are, or
Is that what's on the back of my shirt?
let's see
check
the
it out.
back of your shirt.
And
Back
overdose
of
is on
his
the
shirt
front. I love it.
says, stand up straight. Overdose does not discriminate. That's a true story right there.
Trying
So-
to find a camera. That was awkward.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. We got
You did
mics
great,
and all
man.
kinds of stuff. And I love that point, though, because it sounds like you grew up in a fairly LDS household and obviously went on a mission. And my story is similar. I except I didn't use in high school at all. But it's not, you don't have to have a bunch of back trauma. It can happen to people without trauma. You don't have to have a lack of religion. This happens to everybody, and mission companions happen to come home and start using drugs sometimes. It happens.
So for me, I think a big bit. I try to find reasons as to the why, right?
Okay.
And at the end of the day, I think it's just curiosity, right? I didn't have a big reason as to excuse, like I said. So just curiosity, and I knew that when I put it into my body, it felt good, and I appreciated that, and
So
wanted
what,
to pursue
think
that
that's-
relationship with drugs and alcohol.
I think that's plenty of why.
right.
People do search for why a lot. I did the
Right.
same thing, but it felt great.
How about instead I put my energy into solution?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
This is where I'm at today.
Right.
I know that I need help.
There doesn't need to be a why. You're here.
I'm here.
Right.
Let's talk about
Right.
solution.
It felt great is the why, though.
Right.
yeah,
people,
we're gonna
people
get to
don't
that.
continue doing things that feel terrible.
Yeah.
I love that. And let's get into that, the solution part. I really want to hear about, because you've shared your story with me. I want you to share it with all the listeners. You were a big time recruit, went to the University of Utah, played tight end, right? Tell us about that part of your life and what ultimately maybe the pressures or just the feeling good of substance use. Let's get that.
So I came back. My addiction was waiting for me,
Okay.
and I started playing football. And it's the scene, and
Yeah.
and I got caught up in it, and failed my first drug test with the NCAA.
Were you a junior, sophomore?
Freshman.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, red shirt probably. I think.
Cool.
Pretty sure it was red.
Not cool, but okay. Cool.
I don't waste much time.
Right.
What do they test for? They don't test for alcohol.
In 2000, I don't know.
That was actually a question. I don't know if they test for alcohol. I was asking, but
Yeah, I don't know what they
You don't-
tested for.
you don't remember what you failed for.
Oh, what I failed for was THC. That's what I could not
Okay.
successfully mask and get out of my system. So I
Okay.
tried.
Right. Sure.
Did all those tricks. Right.
Did you buy the
Buy the
fake
buy the
stuff
clean
you
pee
drink,
that you
yeah.
drink, and
Yeah.
didn't. So, failed my second one.
Okay.
That's a year suspension. First one's slap on the wrist. Second one's a year suspension.
Oh.
And so now I can't practice. I can't
Oh.
have access to resources and study hall and tutors and things that
Right.
kinda
entitled
lost your
football
identity.
players normally get.
Listen,
you lost your identity. You were no longer
Right.
part of it.
So quickly fell into victim mode from the get-go, and was priority in that place, and failed my third, and 3 strikes you're out. So I went in and sat down. Ron McBride,
Good guy.
yeah, great guy. Gave me the news, and man, it was painful. It was painful. My school's being paid for, my identity, more importantly, right? Embarrassment, all those things, and I went into it was a pretty dark place. And looking back now where I'm at today, they gave me every opportunity. I'm so thankful for that opportunity that they gave me. But I was in a victim mode for a long time of here I am partying with all these other, and I'm the one that gets caught, right? And trying to
Right.
justify, and it's just unhealthy, super unhealthy behavior, and it kept me sick, and stayed in that dark place. And during that little bit, 6 months or so before that, I married my wife. So we met in the spring of 2001, and she was playing. She was running track, jumping, high jumping at the U, and just smitten from day one by her and her amazing spirit and angel, and she's my best friend. So we got married in 2002, but that was the start of some rough years for us.
Still using at that point.
Yes.
What were you using? Mostly at that point.
Whatever I get my hands on.
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't discriminating really. So I had times when I'd use meth heavily and oxy heavily and Xanax and marijuana and just kind of whatever I could hide.
You're
That
right.
was kind of like my right.
You're right. Everything.
Whatever I can hide.
You just named a bunch of it for sure.
So yeah.
And how aware was your fiance, soon to be wife, of all of this?
Where was she?
How aware was she
Oh.
that you were maybe doing this kind of stuff?
She wasn't aware.
Did you hide it pretty well from
Yeah.
her? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
She didn't know that. Yeah, she didn't know the details. I had opened up early on that I was struggling and with what, and she supported me the best she could, but I wasn't ready to be honest. So
Yeah. So in the last 2 minutes, paint us a picture of kind of what did that look like for you? The conversation and then the transition.
with her,
Yeah.
it was ultimatum.
Got you.
You go to treatment or we're done.
So she finds out over time.
Yeah. So you always think, oh, if I get married, I'll stay sober for that. No,
Right.
didn't. If I have a kid, surely I'll stay sober for that kid. And we have a second kid, maybe number 2, I'll love that kid enough. None of that ever worked, and it was just really brief periods of sobriety. Trying to attend fellowship meetings, and it just wasn't. So she gave me an ultimatum in the spring of 2009. To go to treatment, and it was the best amazing gift that I was ever given. And my parents helped, and God helped, and doors opened, and it was really where it started. And so that's
Where'd you go to treatment?
Renaissance Ranch.
Well, there you have it.
I love
So
it.
I went through this program that I represent today, and I'm obviously passionate, saved my life, passionate about it. Love the staff there, and met guys that were meant to be there when I was there, and have deep love and relationships with a lot of the guys I was in treatment with, and staying in touch with them.
Thank you for sharing that. You guys have been listening to part 1 of episode 008, featuring Taz Decker, the owner of Renaissance Ranch down here in southern Utah. Stay tuned for part 2. In part 2, we're going to get to his journey into recovery and what his life looks like today. Tune back in after this 30-second break.
You are listening to We Do Recover with Jared Miller and co-hosted by Dr. Terry Sellers. We'll be right back after the short break with more of With Jared Miller, brought to you by Steps Recovery Center and the St. George Hilton Garden Inn. We welcome you back to We Do Recover with Jared Miller, co-hosted by Dr. Terry Sellers, brought to you by Steps Recovery Center and the St. George Hilton Garden Inn. And now with part 2 of our podcast, Jared Miller and Dr. Terry Sellers.
Hey, welcome back to part 2, episode 008. We are featuring the owner of Renaissance Ranch down here in southern Utah, Taz Decker. Part 1, he shared his story about what his addiction, where it started, the path.
Beautiful.
Part 2, we're going to transition into his recovery and the successes that he's had today and what his recovery looks like today. But before that,
I got something.
let's get it.
Guess where I slept last night?
I'm starting to
Slept at
catch
the
on.
Hilton Garden. I know. Eventually, if I ask this question enough, you'll get it. Yes, I slept at the Hilton Garden Inn, and they were super kind. We called them at the very last minute, and they were really nice with the accommodations. I had actually tried to make some reservations earlier. I am kind of a procrastinator, and I had tried to make some reservations that day for a couple of other places, and some places were sold out. And the Hilton Garden Inn happened to have a room available, and of course the service was great. I slept like a baby, and please remember that it's always friendly and sunny at the Hilton Garden Inn, St. George, Utah.
Love those guys.
They are awesome,
They've
aren't
been
they?
good. They've been good to me, for sure.
So the cool thing about them too is if like the Hilton's full, or they have the Holiday Inn, or they have the Hyatt, right?
yeah.
It's like a 3 hotel
They got-
partnership,
right.
So they can move some stuff around. They're amazing.
They're even working on, I think, on a 4th property. So that's, yeah, they got some
Awesome.
things going. It's
These
great.
are awesome.
Good for them.
We have a caller this week, Dr. Sellers. Again, that hotline is 801-410-0676. This is your guys' podcast. We just facilitate it. If you have any questions for the doctor, if you have any questions for the guest, if you want to hear me mumble and make some mistakes and try to answer questions, I'm cool with that too. Give us a call, 801-410-0676. I didn't even mess up the numbers this week.
Nice job.
Boom.
We do appreciate your questions, honestly.
Let's
Thanks.
get it. This is from Chris calling in from Tooele. Thank you for listening, Chris. Here we go.
Hi, my name is Chris. I am from Tooele. This question is for you, Dr. Sellers. So I've been around a lot of people that use antidepressants. Some are great on them. What I've seen, some use multiple different kinds, and it still doesn't help. I've seen people kill themselves on them. I've also researched that Utah is the leading nation in antidepressants. Why is this? And why are we taking it if it does or does not help? What is your professional opinion on this subject? And I want to end it with God is great. Thank you guys for all your support and help.
All right. Well, I love that question because, first of all, God is great. That's not a question.
Amen.
That was a great way to end it. But yeah, let me give you a couple of little things about. He mentioned a few things. He said he's got some friends that use antidepressants. Let's use a different word and say they take antidepressants, because in our world we use the word "use" as something completely different, right?
Great point.
I don't know very many people. Well, I don't know very many people that abuse antidepressants. Actually, Wellbutrin occasionally, if you use enough of it can give you a little bit of something. And so I've heard of a few people using Wellbutrin, abusing Wellbutrin. I don't recommend it, obviously, on this show. But for the most part, antidepressants are not abused. They're used. I mean, they're taken, not used, really. So now, antidepressants are not foolproof. One thing we know is depression is for sure real. Depression for sure is a mental illness. Depression for sure is a brain disease. It's not something that people can will themselves out of. If they could, there's no way people would be laying around in bed not able to enjoy anything if they had any other choices. That's not a choice somebody would make. So it's a mental illness, exactly like drug and alcohol abuse is a mental and brain disease as well. You don't just get to choose your way out of it. If that's all you had to do, people would be able to choose their way out of it every day, and people just struggle to do that, okay? So now, not every antidepressant is works on every single person. One of the things we're finding out in newer research is that the enzymes that we use to metabolize antidepressants are subject to genetic modifications. And some people have genetic modifications such that they don't metabolize certain antidepressants the same way as the general population. And if you metabolize a medication way too quickly, it doesn't stay in your system very long, and you won't get the effect it's supposed to give you, right? So we have the ability to test for that now, and we can see that maybe 15% of the general population doesn't metabolize an antidepressant the same way that the rest of the population does. And so if we give you something that you metabolize too quickly, it won't work. If we give you something that you metabolize too slowly, it'll build up in your system, and you will wind up with a whole ton of side effects.
Hey, Doc, isn't there, so there's a genetic test out there, right, that you can take that will predict your metabolism rate, and based off of that, make recommendations or suggestions on what medications potentially would be best for you.
Exactly.
Whether it's a SSRI or SNRI, right?
Yeah.
Or there's different.
Right. Thanks.
That's awesome.
Great. Perfect.
We've done that with some of our clients because
and I do a bunch of it. It's not
by the time you take a medication for 30 days to try to figure out if it's working or not,
right.
you might be done with res.
Right.
And now you're getting out and you're trying something different because
right.
you don't think it's working.
Right.
So we can avoid that.
It takes a bunch of the guesswork out for sure, which in the past it's always been, that's what they do, is they give you an antidepressant. It takes 3 weeks for these things to work, right? You get 3 weeks down the road and sometimes it doesn't work, and the people who have an antidepressant that doesn't work think their doctor's an idiot. The truth is, they just don't work in every single person. But if you can do the test and pinpoint which ones they metabolize normally, you're way more likely to be able to find one that works for that patient. The last thing I want to say on this subject, and there's a lot more we could do, but I don't want to spend the whole second segment on this. He mentioned briefly in just a quick little quip that he's had some friends commit suicide on antidepressants. Let's not forget, we're not giving antidepressants to people that aren't depressed.
Good
You're
point.
already in a high-risk population of people who are depressed, and almost nobody kills themselves when they're not depressed. And so if you take and just sideline a whole group of people that are already depressed, yes, your suicide rates in that group are going to be higher than the general population to begin with. Now, occasionally antidepressants can make a few people have more suicidal thoughts, but typically those people aren't metabolizing that medication the right way. So I think they're a useful tool. I think that we use them quite a bit. His observation about Utah being number one in the nation is true, and I think part of that is societal pressures that we have in Utah, maybe that some other states don't have quite as much as we do. I think we use a lot of antidepressants in Utah as well. I mean,
Man,
there's a lot of stuff to unpack in that question.
You know,
for sure.
I think a lot of people, when they call in these questions, maybe they think they have to come up with some super detailed medical question for you. That was a great question and great answer. Thank you for helping out, Taz, as well. I mean, that was awesome, guys. I'm lucky to be sitting here amongst some people that have some education, know what they're talking about.
Well, Terry throws me bones once in a while when I'm struggling, so you'd like to repay the favor. Terry wasn't struggling.
Thanks. No. I did. I appreciate the help. It was a really good observation, and it's true. Like, I think when this testing will catch on more and more. Not everyone's doing it right now, but it's going to be very helpful to take in a little bit of the guesswork out of treating people with mental illness.
Maybe get you on the right thing a little bit quicker.
Yeah,
For sure. Chris,
Right.
thank you for calling in. We appreciate
Yeah,
that.
thanks. Great question.
Thanks,
Keep the
Chris.
questions coming. All right, let's go. We need to get moving on. I have an observation before we move on, though, and that was one of the things that Taz had said earlier is one of the points I always try to make, and that is in the midbrain, when you start releasing that much dopamine from the use of drugs or alcohol, that the drugs or alcohol start to be tagged in your midbrain as survival, because your midbrain's job is to keep you alive. And so every time you use a drug or alcohol, your midbrain feels really good and thinks, this is how I'm going to survive. If that's the case, then everything else in life is less important to your midbrain than survival. And therefore, when you say the point like, well, this kid's going to keep me sober, well, this marriage is going to keep me sober, well, this next kid will keep me sober, none of those things are more important to your midbrain than you continuing to survive. And so there isn't, people say all the time, oh, you ignored your wife and kids. That's not really what's going on. You're actually just trying to survive. And so, yeah, typically kids and wives and events like that don't keep people sober. It's got to be a little deeper than that. So, excellent observation. Okay, let's go. We don't have as much time as I just been yapping for way too long, but let's transition. You went to Renaissance Ranch.
Okay, that's a countdown. Good. I'm glad I got mine. So, checked in, and I had a good time in my first stint. So I've been multiple times, and but really enjoyed my first experience of treatment. Meaning that I got some clarity and I started laughing.
Yeah.
And I started connecting with other dudes in recovery and being emotionally honest with them, and I started feeling connection that I hadn't felt in a really long time. That type of connection, right?
Is it safe to say maybe the connections that you lost when you fell out of football? Because I know for football, for me, it was a huge identity, right? And so nowadays, when I get around Ian Raiders and Utahs and Dr. Sellers, I feel that camaraderie.
Yeah. Yeah. So it had been close to a decade, right, before I probably really felt some connection.
Yeah.
Right. So that's, true point. So I was pretty lonely up until that point. So I, started coming out of that a little bit, but I struggled. I really struggled with sitting in a room with people that had been in jail, because I hadn't, that had lost their job, because I really hadn't done that. Right. Had lost their house, I hadn't done that.
All you lost was your identity, though.
And it talks about that, right? Talks about in the big book, or the 12 by 12, right, that young people are getting clean, getting sober, in recovery, and they can spare the last two decades, 10 to 20 years of misery, right? Yeah. By recognizing that. So I'm not like you, right? I had a really hard time doing that and pointing fingers. And again, once I recognized that unmanageability for me was emotional, spiritual, mental, my relationships, physical, then I was able to admit and ask for help and get some desperation. So I stayed sober, did sober living thing. I got out of residential, did sober living for a few months, moved back home, stayed sober for about 9 months, and then I relapsed. And I would say one of the things for me looking back on this particular experience and what I learned from it is my disease dies in the daylight.
Oh.
Okay. So I went to res and I had a prescription for Xanax. Okay. And I had a refill. Never refilled it. So the thought pops in, I wonder if you called, right? I'm like around 8 months. I wonder if you called, if they'd refill that. Don't call, right? But I didn't say anything,
right,
to anybody, right?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sponsor, friend.
Sure.
Anybody.
You're not going to call, but I'm just not going to tell anybody.
It's over for 8 months. I'm solid. I'm good.
Sure. No reason to cancel it.
So you let that thought fester.
Because I'm not going to call.
Right. You let that thought fester. And
right.
I didn't have practice. I haven't been in many experiences where I've been forced to play tapes forward in recovery. Mm-hmm. And this, it could have ended a lot worse, and it was pretty bad. And, it took me down a path of 9 months of using and then back into residential. the fall of 2010. Almost the exact same story. Got out, relapse, had about 9 months, and then this was a short relapse. And in 2011, I wasn't happy with it. I wasn't happy without it, and I just said, I'm miserable. I can't live like this anymore. I got to get honest.
Yeah.
I need to find a solution. And so for one of the first times for me, I got honest in July of 2011.
Would you say that was the birth of your recovery?
Yeah. So, went in the first time 2009. So I've been getting up and falling down since 2009. And I said, at that point, one thing, I will always fight. I will always get back up. I might not do this thing perfect, and I haven't, but I will always continue to fight, and I'll always, continue to show up. And even when things are hard, and, learn along the way. So I finally now I'm on a path, right? That feels solid, feels good. And fast forward to, I worked for Marriott Corporation for about 10 years.
Okay.
And I had a really strong feeling I wasn't going to be doing that much longer. And this was in 2013. And so I had a sponsor, and I was talking to him, and he's like, well, what do you want to do?
Sometimes those are the hardest questions, right?
And I said, I don't think I'm going to be doing this much longer. He said, what do you want to do? I said, well, I want to help people. We had started some meetings in Clearfield where we lived at the time, and was really doing some 12-step work. And that's where I felt on path. That's where I felt purpose. That's where I felt invigorated. And so I was like, in that moment, I was like, I want to help people. He's like, what do you think about treatment? I was like, I love it. Love treatment, love recovery. He's like, no, as an occupation. And so he planted the seed, and we worked on an idea together. It didn't end up working out. And I was practicing my step 11, trying to get, seek through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact. For me is, do I pursue this path, and how do I carry that out?
That's a pretty good guy to ask.
Right.
Yeah.
So I asked God. He has a good track record.
Yeah.
Right.
Seems to do okay.
Yeah. So I can trust him. So anyway, through that practice of prayer and meditation and trying to find clarity, and I found that the universe always shows up. God always shows up, right? So he said, call Dave Pinniger. So okay, I know Dave, not super well, but anyway, Dave was the first Renaissance affiliate in Idaho Falls.
Okay.
He's an alumni, and anyway, so Dave was instrumental in helping me get St. George up and running. And in 2014, we opened.
That's amazing.
Renaissance Recovery.
I want to ask you something real quick. I think a lot of times when we want to do something different, right, or we want more out of our lives, to reach out to somebody, like I'm sure at the time you're reaching out to him, how do you start that conversation, right? Because I've gone to people that I have passion for, vision for. What did that conversation look like when you called him?
Well, if you know him, he's very similar to my 12. This is not going to sound good. He's very similar to my 12-year-old daughter, who I explained is very enthusiastic.
Wow.
Sorry, Dave.
But I think you complimented your 12-year-old daughter, so I think it's okay.
It's all good.
You didn't paint her as anything other than awesome.
Just genuine, heart of gold, enthusiastic, excited. I call him, and he's like, get up here now. You got to get up here. Come to Idaho Falls. Come stay with me for a few days, and we'll show you how we do this Renaissance, outpatient thing, and we'll see if you like it, And it's just that's just how he rolls, right? So we go up there, and I go up there and sit with him and shadow him for a day, and we don't really do much. He's just having a good time, and we're just chatting and anyway.
Just building that relationship.
Yeah. So the conversation was very positive. I said, I don't know if I am what they're looking for as an affiliate owner. Mm. And he looked at me in the eye and he said, you're exactly what they're looking for. And I don't know if that was true or not, but he made me believe that was true. Mm-hmm. And he breathed life into me and hope, right? It's like people are like, I don't know if I can stay sober. I know you can.
That's powerful. Very powerful.
Thank heavens for the Dave Pinnekers of the world.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So he's one of the, one of my close friends and pillars. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, that's awesome. So he put you on this path of starting Renaissance Ranch. Was it a bam success overnight? Tell us a little bit about what, I'm sure there were some struggles in there. I'm sure that there was some days that you thought to yourself, did I bite off more than I could chew?
yeah. Yeah. So, looking back, what do we got here?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Looking back, I had no business opening a treatment center. And when I say that is at the time I had less than 3 years sober.
Okay.
Right. And in my mind, that's someone who isn't qualified, right? So I'm dealing with my limiting beliefs from the get-go.
Love that.
Right. And I feel that the only reason why is I had a lot of help from people and from God to make things happen. And the more now 6 years in, I'm like, oh man, the longer I'm in it, the less I know, the less I realize that I know. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Sure.
You're realizing that you didn't know much, especially starting out, the longer you're in it.
Right. I didn't know much starting out, and I definitely don't know much
And you
now.
know even less now.
I know even less now.
However, between you and God, you got a long sobriety record.
Right.
If you add them up, that's a lot of sobriety.
So it hasn't. No, it's St. George has been so welcoming and so loving and so accepting, and the community here is the recovery community is thriving, and it's in change over the last 5 years, and it's gotten much. I don't know much, but it's improving. It's better. It's great. People are getting help, and we've been really lucky. It's the first couple of years are really good. We opened a second location in Las Vegas.
Way cool. How many years down the road was that?
2 years. So 2 years after we opened St. George.
Way cool.
And that was open for 2 years, and then we closed that down. And we had had some couple sober livings and a drug testing lab, and a lot of additional things on the plate, and the quality of life started to diminish.
Your quality of life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I felt stretched, and I felt thin. And so we scaled everything back, and right now we just have Renaissance Recovery in St. George. And who knows, looking back, pandemic, right? Maybe, who knows what
Probably a blessing in disguise.
that would have looked like.
Yeah, what are you guys doing during the pandemic? Tell me, what is Renaissance Ranch today? What's going on there? What services do you provide?
So we are still exclusively a telehealth.
Okay.
So we are doing everything.
Not uncommon.
Doing everything through Zoom. So people, they have that option. And it's just, I'm IOP, outpatient, intensive outpatient treatment, and we do male and female, adults, and substance abuse, mental health. We have 2 different groups right now. So we have 4 therapists. Fairly small operation, about 20 clients. And that's kind of our sweet spot. We don't allow more than 12 clients in a group. And we have 2 groups. And so if those are full, 24 is our capacity. And we feel that the quality of care is good, and people are getting the attention that they need. And so
I personally want to say, Taz, I think it's great that you did some self-reflection, realized, hey, instead of being a jack of all trades, master of none, right? You really honed in on, this is my bread and butter. This is what I'm good at. This is where I'm going to put my energy, my focus, and make it the best that I can make it. Yeah, that's awesome, dude. I got a lot of respect for that.
We've seen too many failures in this business of people who have some success and then decide they have to rule the entire world. Like build these giant sort of conglomerates and then kind of stretch themselves too thin and can't do it. And I think it's hard to do because, listen, treating addiction is a calling and a beautiful service. But it can go to your head occasionally if you don't stay grounded, if you don't stay humble, and if you start deciding you have to rule the world. All of a sudden now you got to have, instead of 1 place, you got to have 5 places. Instead of 5, you got to have 20 instead of 20.
Yeah.
Like, when is it enough?
Yeah, well said. So you got a minute left. Taz Decker. Thank you so much for coming on our show, We Do Recover. Leave our listeners with some hope, man. There's some people out there listening to this that are in early recovery. Give them some hope.
You know, FFTs. Brene Brown has a new podcast called FFTs, and it stands for freaking first times, but she says a different word. You know,
a different word for time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've been in, this year has been, you know, freaking first times with a lot of different things. Right. And so, I think just being patient with ourselves is huge. And just being, you know, kind to others. And just realize, you know, we're learning as we go. Right.
Thank you.
We can do hard things, right? We can absolutely do hard things.
Absolutely. Thank you again so much for coming on. Listeners,
Taz Decker,
like this,
Renaissance Ranch.
follow this, share this. Thank you. Remember, it is your podcast. See you next week, episode 009.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on We Do Recover with Jared Miller.
Help us spread our message of hope. Like, comment, and share.
If you have any topics or ideas for future shows, please share that on our Facebook page.
That Facebook page is We Do Recover with Jared Miller. If you or a loved one needs help, please reach out to us. Again, thank you for listening.
Brought to you by Steps Recovery Center and the St. George Hilton Garden Inn. This has been a production from A Podcast Studio.